Thank you.
And we'll start by giving him a very big applause.
Simplicity is a great virtue, but it requires hard work to achieve it and education to appreciate it. And to make matters worse, complexity sells better. I'm not paid to be here, so I get to talk about simple software, mostly OpenBSD. Maybe a lot of you work at companies and you use big complex software. Unfortunately, you're not using OpenBSD, but you can benefit from many of the ideas in the talk. Also, I can help you if you hire me, but you have to hire me because it sells better. But today there's a special promotion. You can ask me questions about other softwares related to what I'm saying, maybe the softwares you're using, and I'll do my best to answer. And yeah, let's go. We're talking about Django. You probably run this. Raise your hand if you run this. Great. Yes. Okay. And then you do that, and then you can make a web request to here. But yes, maybe you want to run something else in production. Anyone want to say why you should run this in production instead of the other one in production? Raise your hand. No. No one wants to say? Yes. You get an exotic candy. Yes. They say not to do it because, yeah, like security, and they also use a lot of memory and security again. So you do this one. You could use a lot of other servers, but it actually does. Please raise your hand if you really have no idea about this, because then I do need to explain a little bit about it. But, okay, but you know about this one, right? Okay, it does the same thing, but this one's better. And safer and all that stuff. It does the same thing in the sense you still get the address at, you still get the website hosted like this. Okay. But now, instead of using an example project, let's use BornHack, because that's a Django application, in fact, and I'll take some more examples from it. Anyone know what BornHack is? Who wants to tell us what BornHack is? Hacker event, yeah. You get a candy too. Oh, I'm not very good at that. Okay, yeah. Yeah, okay. And then it's at that address again. Now, we're going to run like 100 Django applications on the same host. We could run them all as my main user RM, where I also do like email and web browsing. Who wants to say, well, that's a bad idea? Or maybe you're scared of these candies now. Yeah, getting confused with the command, yeah, that's a good one. In general, if that's actually my main concern, my main fear, that I'm going to mess something up. But you have 100 programs running on the same user. They all have access to different sensitive information. And maybe there's some problem with one of them and can mess up one of the others. So I want to run them as separate users. So I'm going to create a user for BornHack with this command. And then I'm going to run the same command as before, but I'm going to run as BornHack user. So now when you exploit my BornHack application, you only get access to whatever BornHack user has. You don't get access to my email. You don't get access to like my other Django application. Did that sort of make sense? Okay. So I run it as the BornHack user, but it still is the same web address. So I still access it by the same address in my HTTP client. But there's a problem with this. We're going to run 100 Django applications in the same box. See a problem? Anyone want to tell me the problem? Yes, the port. We can't have all 100 of them use the same port. So, oh yeah, do you want a candy? Oops, sorry. Yeah, so we set the port like this in Unicorn. And if you have another server, they'll have some other option for it. And then it's almost the same address. And now we have 100 of these Unicorn instances, perhaps. Let's start them all at boot, and we can do that by putting the command in this file, this file, etc rc.de bornhack. And this is the same command, just broken into parts so that the rc.subr framework from OpenBSD will know that when I run this command, rc control enable bornhack, it'll know to start bornhack on boot. And also it'll know that if I put a command like this in my cron tab, every hour it'll tell me if bornhack crashed and if any of my other Django applications crashed. And I still access it by the same address as we've been talking about. So now another problem. I don't like this address. I think instead of being http://numbers, it should look like this. https:// some nice name. And there are a lot of ways you could do this. The way I'm going to show you is with a reverse proxy. And I've been showing. I'm going to show a lot of configuration files. In case those configuration files don't make sense, you can just ignore it and figure, like, this is the general structure we're going for. There's a web browser that's going to make a web request to the relay on the normal TLS port, and then the relay is going to make the web request to the server that we've been talking about the whole talk so far. And now I'm going to show you the configuration file. Well, scary configuration file. Let's just look at these lines. This line says we're going to listen to everything IP4. We could also do IP6 on TLS port. This one says if the host header matches bornhack.example.com, we're going to forward it to bornhack, where bornhack is the local host, port 2003. That's how we do one Django application with the reverse proxy thing. To do several, we put them all in the same file. So now, depending on the host header, we forward to a different place. So now we have what we just said. The remote web browser goes to the relay daemon, and then it goes back to whatever Django application is. So it could be the bar Django application on port 2002, or the bornhack on port 2003, or something else. There's still one little thing for TLS. We need to have the hosts configured on our client. I actually put too much things in the abstract, so I'm going to skip over how to do this really. This is the sloppy way to do it, or this is the, I don't know. This is the way I actually do it, but this is the easy way to do it. For internal stuff, this works. But anyway, you do those commands, then you can access it by the name. And the TLS verification will work properly. Did that sort of, did this part about relay make sense? Okay. And you know, like, you can stop me if something doesn't make sense, or during the talk even ask about other softwares you might want to do it with. Yeah, so we did, like, say we have a bunch of different Django applications running Unicorn or some other thing on the same host with different ports, and then we have the relay to get everything from our main port to those. I think we should have a firewall. Anyone want to say why we should have a firewall? Yeah? Security reasons, yes. Any more specific? Or you just want to check off the box for the security? Yes, I don't want all my server to be open. Candy? Oh. Okay. So so the way we're going to do this is I want to allow this type of request. I want the remote web browser to go to the relay daemon and the relay daemon to go to the Unicorn. But I don't want to allow the bornhack user, so the bornhack web application, to access some other Django application running on the same server. I also don't want, is this just the reverse? Yeah, I don't want the reverse either, okay. And I also don't want the bornhack user to be able to get to the relay daemon, because then it can get to all the other applications that are on the server. I also don't want the bornhack user to see the DNS server, because it doesn't need the DNS server. And you can also exfiltrate data that way, but principle is just you don't need the DNS server. I also don't want the bornhack user to, unfortunately, see Django Day website, because it doesn't need to. It doesn't need to go to the internet. So the concept is I want the bornhack user to have no internet access, and I want nothing to be able to access the bornhack user, except for the few places where I need it. And one place where I need it is, well, we'll get to that. So the only thing I want to allow is this one. And we're going to do it with the one firewall that I know how to use, PF. and it works very well because it's simple and it runs on OpenBSD. This is, I'm going to go through the parts of the configuration file. Normally, a PF configuration file, you have a bunch of lines, and the last matching line is the one that matters. The first line says we allow everything. Second one, the first one is a comment. The second one says we allow everything. Then we say block incoming TCP and UDP connections to local hosts from non-root users. So this means that if I'm running Unicorn on port 2003, that will be blocked because it's an incoming TCP connection. Then also block the outgoing TCP connections from most users. So this will include the Django user. That means the Bornhack application can't make a web request to Django Day website. We're only blocking TCP and UDP. There are actually other protocols, and you can block them, but it's more annoying. So, but I'm actually comfortable with this. Yeah, so we blocked everything now. Now we can't run our Django application. So now we need to open the part that we do want. So we're going to say we're allowing incoming connections to port 2002 for the bar user, which is running some Django application. 2003 for Bornhack user, and so on. If we were running some other relay, we might need to do the same for the relay, but the relay daemon runs as root, so that's covered by the first rule that I set. So now, did I have a diagram for this? Yeah. So now, note Bornhack user can't actually make a request to itself because Bornhack user is only allowed to incoming TCP, not outgoing TCP. Does that make sense? Yeah. So summary of that configuration file, too much configuration file, is we allow some web browser to access our relay daemon running on port 443 with TLS and send that to the Unicorn running on some other port. I forgot to mention, the relay daemon also handles the TLS. So the Django application doesn't need to know anything about certificates. It's like you run as if you ran the management, the development server. That doesn't have anything about TLS. Yeah, and we block all the other stuff. Yeah, that was a lot of configuration files, so let's talk about something easier, politics. I like freedom, so I like GNU. I like free software, and GNU licenses protect the end users by being viral, by saying that I'm going to give some free software to you, and you can do what you want with it, but if you give it to someone else, you cannot enslave that other person. You have to pass those rights on to the other person. So it's strange that I would use OpenBSD, which has a different politics and has a permissive license where they give away the software and you're allowed to enslave your users using OpenBSDs. Because OpenBSD, the view of OpenBSD is more like we want to improve the world. People are, for whatever reason, buying stuff from commercial software companies that are often going to implement bad solutions to already solve problems. So the best we can do is to give our stuff away from free and hope that the people will take it and integrate it, and then the end users will get well-functioning products. And so, yeah, but if I'm a user of OpenBSD, it's okay. So that's my attitude. I like freedom, so OpenBSD gives me the freedom. I contribute a very tiny bit to BSD operating systems. It's not enough that the license bothers me, but if I contributed more, maybe I would insist on a copyleft license. The other thing is because OpenBSD doesn't have the same specific goal, they're not certified by Free Software Foundation as a free operating system. But the differences are kind of nitpicky, and I'm going to show you them here. It's not really something to be worried about if you are competent. So the two things that I think are non-free in OpenBSD. One is that it's possible to build a package from source. It's called a port. Build a port from source. So like you could build a Python from source. Normally you would install the binary, but it's possible to build it from source. And there are some things you can build from source that are proprietary, and so they can't give you the binary. And so if you're doing this, you need to look at the license field to make sure it's free software and you're not being enslaved. That's the one thing. The other thing is Free Software Foundation says drivers, if you can update the driver to some chip, not some other chip on the CPU, on the computer, that needs to be free software. But if you can't update it, it's just stored on the device, like on the PCI card or whatever, and you can't update it, then it doesn't matter. OpenBSD's attitude is, either way, it's fine. It doesn't make a difference whether you can update it or not. So OpenBSD allows you to install proprietary firmware on other chips in your computer. Okay, back to configuration files. Yes, I shortened the part on the database. Okay. We have now like 100 Django applications running on the same computer. Thank you. So I like to run them all in the same database. It makes, like if they're small enough, it makes backups easier and stuff. But some things to consider if we have them all as 100 separate users running 100 separate Django applications. Let's say one category of database is file-based connections. That would be like SQLite or Postgres using a Unix socket, which is a file. For these, if you have each user, each Django application is a separate user, you need to set the permissions of that. Well, you can use a separate SQLite database per user, but if you use Postgres, you have to set the permissions appropriately. 777 is often okay, because it's a Unix socket. It's just the communication socket, yeah. Then the other option, which is maybe more normal, is if you want to have your database go over a network connection. And in that case, like this is probably, if you don't know what I'm talking about, this is probably what you've done. In that case, you need to open the port in the firewall, the same way I did before, but for the different port. Okay. Yeah, database. I could talk a lot more about database, but I want to get to some like kind of new things that come about when you have everything on one big Unix system. So one thing is installing packages. A lot of people like to use virtual environments. Well, I have all my Django applications running as separate users, so I don't need to make a virtual environment. I can use normal pip. In a way, it's a virtual environment, but it's using the local. If you do this, Bornhack is the only user that gets these packages because it's installed on the Bornhack user. Except this doesn't work because we set the firewall so that you can't access PyPI. So one option is to open the firewall for PyPI. There's actually a little smarter way to do this. Like I actually do it so that I would actually do it so that I could turn it on just when I'm doing the installation and turn it off right after. But idea is open port for PyPI, open the firewall for PyPI. But what I actually do is this: I run pip as a separate user. I make a virtual environment as a separate user, and then I copy the whole thing to the Bornhack user. That's what these commands do. And but they're I think they're both pretty good options. Yeah. And now we get to the things that are like I wanted to put in some things that are like kind of maybe a little like unusually easy if you do things this way. Yeah. Let's say we have, like we could have the Bornhack application being just our only user, but we could have two users collaborate. Let's say we have some big website where you upload lots of different files. Like maybe the one we just talked about actually would be a good example. Maybe it's a bit too big for $1. So let's say we have big website user running a Django application, and the media route is this. And big website has like sensitive information in it, and it has all these media files, and its network connection. Also, we have some search engine. I like to use Recall. Recall, the way Recall works is it takes a list of all the files, and then it runs a filter on each file. And the filters is using lots of different programs to support lots of different file types. So Recall is also a very complex application. And I want to separate them, because if there's a problem with one, I don't want it to mess up the other. So one way I can do this is I make the search engine a member of the big website group, and then I set up the file permissions so that the search engine can get read access to those files. And then the search engine can index all those files, but it doesn't have access to anything else about the database. And then I could actually run a separate website from the search engine user just to search the files. And now they're quite separate, but it operates very smoothly. Did that make any sense? Okay, good. And then another way you can do it is with doas. Doas is from OpenBSD, but you might be more familiar with sudo, which is a much more complex way of doing the same thing, but sudo came first. So let's imagine we're at BornHack, which is a camp, like on a field, and we have the speaker tent where we give talks, and we have a bar where we buy alcohol and pay for the camp so that we can have more talks. And let's imagine we're going to tell people where they should go by flying an internet-connected flamethrower drone around the camp. And it's going to go to the bar when they should go to the bar and drink, and it's going to go to the speaker tent when they should go to the speaker tent and watch talks. This flamethrower drone is very complicated software, so we don't want the Django application to have a risk of messing with that. And also, we don't want the flamethrower drone to like mess up our Django, our user, anything about our BornHack website, which is quite complex. So we're going to give a very small interface between them. This is the doas configuration file. We're going to allow the BornHack user to execute a command as the flamethrower user. And the command only has two options. You can run the flame program with the argument move to speaker tent, and you can run the flame program with the argument move to bar. And we're not even going to give it access to turn on the flamethrower. Let's say for safety reasons, we want a person to turn on the flamethrower. But we're okay with the website to direct where the drone should go. So this is the doas configuration, and then we can write this Python in the BornHack Django application that says, as the user flame, run the program flame with the argument move to speaker tent. And it'll, if the command fails, it'll raise an exception. And so this way, BornHack user can have some event that directs the flamethrower drone to move around, but the only interface is move here, move there. So if there's some problem with either one, it doesn't affect the other. Oh, summarizing the stuff we talked about, normal Python stuff, and then set up with services, and then we had the reverse proxy, so you can have a bunch of things with TLS. Then firewall, database, some cool things you can do with multiple users. Oh, cool, I have a lot of time. And yeah, and I thought I wasn't going to have time for these, but it turns out I did. Sorry. Anyway, but that's that. Thank you.
Yeah, we got ready so quickly that you actually started the talk a little bit before time, so that's, sorry about that. Now we've got a lot of time for questions, though. So really, I actually think I've heard a lot of people get inspired by Ruby on Rails in the Django community. Like, we should listen to what they're doing there. But I think we're also like mostly Linux users here, so it's super nice to hear how it's done in the BSD world. There is a question there.
So does this somehow compensate the lack of Docker on OpenBSD?
Does this?
I mean,
okay.
It doesn't have a Docker, but
Yeah,
what are the pros and cons?
Well, does it compensate for Docker? I think the better way to start the discussion is, why do we use Docker? Technically, it kind of works similar to this, because I think it's kind of like a jail. A lot of people think that Docker gives them security, and it doesn't. So, yeah. But what I think one of the main reasons for Docker is that you want to install some configuration that it just happens that like the packages are written to work as root. So you use like apt get install and it goes as root. And you just don't know how to install it as a normal user. But you can compile all these to work as a normal user. So so one of the reasons for Docker is like, I mean, this is like my controversial view on it, that it's just because people don't know how to install things not as root. Okay, so that one, this doesn't help you with. But everything else, I think it does. So another is so that you can have like a reproducible environment. Well, yeah, you can have some recipe to install this. It'll be a little different. What else does Docker help you with? Another thing about Docker is that you have like all these Docker files that you can reuse someone else's Docker file, but this is so easy, so I don't need that. I don't know. Is there other things you like about Docker that if you say that, then I can tell you?
No, it also does some networking with the ports and so on. So
Okay, Docker. One setting for Docker is, yeah. So it does help with that. One setting for Docker is just to use the normal host networking. Another is to say only expose these ports, and yeah, that's a. These are alternatives, yeah, for that.
Next question? Yes?
Oh, and candy for people who ask questions.
Thank you. Congratulations for the presentation. It was super interesting to me personally. Always the BSD world was somewhat exotic, and I always get, mesmerized by it. I have a question because I'm working a lot with Docker, and I always know that it's what you said. You believe that it's secure, but there's a lot of caveats. One of them is SUID in Linux. How a process can use SUID to get root privileges. Is this something that we can get guarded from in the BSD world? And I'm not sure.
No, but it's like, if you know what you're doing, it's the same approach, the way you protect in Docker in this. Maybe I should just explain the risk. You run the setuid binary. The setuid binary is owned by, let's say, root, and it can do special things. So for example, ping is a setuid binary because, I mean, at least on OpenBSD, I don't know how it works on Linux. Probably it works the same way, that the root user is the only one that can make that type of network request. But another user can execute this program, and it'll run as if the root user executed it. So like an easy attack with Docker is make something setuid root from inside the Docker, and yeah. So where do I want to go with this?
So
yeah, so it's the same. To get around that, just do it properly, or use a virtual machine, I think, or a separate computer. Yeah.
Thank you.
This reminded me of another thing about Docker. You can just use an old-fashioned chroot in OpenBSD, and also FreeBSD has jails, which are similar. It's like a stronger version, similar like chroots, and that'll have the same problem, but it'll have the benefit that you can install things as root inside of the chroot. Yeah. And you get a candy, if I can reach. Oops. Yeah.
You're getting better at the candy throwing, I have to say.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Yeah. We do have time.
You didn't mention certificates during the build-up stack. Was that on purpose?
Yeah, I just didn't think I'd have so much time. But is there a particular question you have about certificates? Okay. I don't know if I can. You just want me to say something about certificates, or?
Whether it was not needed, or I mean, I think what's it called today that you use it's fairly easy to set up, at least on the Linux with
It's
the
like a
certbot.
certbot. Let's encrypt.
I find that too complicated. I just use OpenSSL or LibreSSL. OpenBSD made LibreSSL, but yeah. So okay, so actually, if it's my internal stuff, I have a wildcard certificate. That's the one that you saw in the configuration file. Yeah, but yeah. So the way this configuration file is set up is it's a wildcard certificate, but doesn't have to be a wildcard certificate, and this is the way you do it. And if you want to know more information, look at the manual page for relayd.conf. Yes. And
Are we gonna have flamethrower drones on board Hack next year?
I don't know. You can make one. Yeah. We have flamethrowers and we have drones. Just another flamethrower drones. So, I mean, did you already ask a question, or did you already get a candy? Okay, I guess someone around here got a candy already. So, you and yeah. And we had another question.
No. You do get candy still. There is still more left.
Yeah, there's a bunch left. Yeah, and you know, these are from there's someone here who's from the same place as the candies. Yeah, okay. Did you get one already? No. Yeah. Because I was in Serbia. to impress you.
So I have one final question then. Can I also get one?
Well, you know, you have to ask a better question than that. You have to ask a better question than that. But you can get one because you're an organizer.
Okay, so first of all, a big applause for RM. Really super nice talk. We're gonna do a short break, so-called water break.